Drag racing and a strip of pavement. Simple, savage, sensational. The scene where it's all happening. The national championships at Indianapolis. Groovy.
The NHRA National Drags are brought to you by Fram Corporation, maker of the finest in oil, air, and fuel filters.
Labor Day at Indianapolis is a drag racer's holiday. 1,500 of the top dragsters and drivers in the nation converge on the racing capital of the world for the NHRA Nationals, the biggest, most prestigious event in this frantic, swinging sport. Nearly 200 of the fierce 230-mile-an-hour fuel-burning dragsters are here, along with dozens of gas-powered rails, cars that are nearly as fast as the fuelers. And the funny cars, in this case a Camaro with a 1,000 horsepower supercharged engine lurking beneath its fiberglass hood. Hundreds of altered roadsters and coupes are also on hand, all bulging with power. And sometimes about all the driver can handle. But the most popular classes of all are the stock machines like you may drive on the street. That is, if your car can run the quarter mile in 10 seconds at speeds of 130 miles an hour. The quickest are called superstocks because of the rather liberal modifications allowed to their engines and chassis. And the acknowledged king of the superstock drivers is a cigar-puffing traditional from Pennsylvania named Bill Grumpy Jenkins. He calls the cars Grumpy's toys, but at the rate he drives them, they're far from playthings. Jenkins is the defending Superstock champion at Indy, and that, plus his brilliance both as a driver and engine tuner, makes him a favorite to repeat.
You have an engineering background, don't you?
Well, I went to Cornell for about 3 years, but I didn't finish and get a degree. But it was in mechanical engineering at that time. Father died, and I was broke, and maybe not the best student there was. Maybe spent too much time fooling around with cars.
Have you always been involved in stock car racing?
No, as far as drag racing is concerned, I've worked on all kinds of drag race equipment, even fuel dragsters back in 1958, 59. And gotten back into the stock car business because it seemed to fit this part of the country a little bit better, and I built a business around working on stock cars, and sort of used the drag racing at that point in the game as a semi-hobby and a little bit of advertising.
Bill, where is the real satisfaction in your particular participation in drag racing, in building and tuning the automobiles, or in actually winning the races?
Well, the biggest satisfaction is to get the performance out of the automobiles. Winning the racing is sort of maybe like icing on the cake, but being able to make the cars run is far more satisfying to me.
To win the Nationals again, Grumpy must beat the best superstock drivers in the National Hot Rod Association, and among them is a burly Californian named Dick Landy. Dandy Dick Landy, as he's known to his fans.
Who specifically are the men that you're worried about? Biggest one is my own competitor or teammate is Sox and Martin Group. And then in the Chevrolet team, it's Bill Jenkins, Grumpy. He's a hard one to beat.
Ronnie Sox is the driving partner of the Sox and Martin team, and he too knows where his competition lies.
I'd say some of the top drivers are Bill Jenkins, Bill Flynn in the Yankee Peddler, Ed Hedrick, which is another one of Jenkins' cars. All these guys are real good and they're real competitive. Don Grother in the Plymouth is running way below the record, so it seems like it's going to be anybody's race, really.
A young engineer named Ed Hedrick is teaming with Jenkins in the super stock ranks. He will drive a Chevy 2, while the boss will handle a Camaro. Backing up a champion is never easy work, but Hedrick looks on his chance to drive for Grumpy as a real opportunity.
Ed Hedrick, what is it like to drive for a man like Bill Jenkins?
Well, I guess first of all, it's very tough because Bill is very exacting and very demanding. He's, what I guess is called a perfectionist. Bill has treated us very well. He's been very lenient with a lot of my mistakes in driving, and we were very happy to drive for him. And at least as far as I'm concerned, I think it was a real big opportunity for me.
Although he's one of the most famous drivers in the business, Grumpy and his Camaro are nearly lost in the swirl of racing activity that spreads across the Indianapolis Raceway Park pits. Drag racing is decidedly co-ed. The gals help the crews by polishing, applying decals, and, well, you know, just being there. The first 3 days of the long holiday weekend are devoted to practice and qualifying runs for the elimination. Prize money at Indy totals over $100,000, so there's a certain amount of incentive mixed in with all the fun. Nonetheless, drag racers never take themselves too seriously, and if all else fails, a car might run on the sheer madness of its name alone. He calls himself King Rat, and his rivals know him as Tampa Dan, or simply Big Daddy. He's Don Garlits, the Babe Ruth, Isaac Newton, and P.T. Barnum of drag racing, all rolled into one intense, muscular body. Big Daddy is looking for his third Nationals victory and his second in a row. If any man rivals Garlits, it's Don Prudhomme, a cool Californian who won Indy in 1965. Nicknamed the Snake, Prudhomme is a major threat to Garlits' title hopes.
Last year, Brock, as you know, we knew that the car would run faster than we were running it in the time trials, and we were, as the saying in the sport goes, sandbagging. And we didn't want to make a real good run until it was absolutely necessary. Well, this year there'd be no point in trying anything like that because the competition knows what the car is capable of. So this year we just want to come in and run real strong and let the guys know just what the car will do, and hope on the psychological effect of just a good running car in the other lane.
In other words, you plan to just maintain as much pressure on the opposition as you possibly can, but not really to change your tactics as you go on through the event.
No, I'll squeeze a tree just as tight as I always do, and I'll have my little tricks in the eliminations, lanes, and what you'd say to the competition and everything, and lane choices, and these things will always, you know, nothing is really planned far ahead. It's just as we go along and the opportunity presents itself, that's what I'll do.
Have you ever faced a stronger field than this one?
No, this is the toughest. I think this is the toughest field they ever had in drag racing. I think all the cars, by the time they qualified, will be in the 6-second bracket.
Is this racetrack a hard one to drive?
No, not actually. It's pretty easy, matter of fact, because the traction is so good. As you know, that the ETs are real low, and they're most all the cars now are in the 6s that are in the 32-car field. So it has to be a pretty good track.
When you get into eliminations, do you change your driving style or your tactics based on whom you're going to compete against?
Well, somewhat. Actually, I change it on how the engine's running. If the engine is running real strong, I can drive it fairly easy. If it's running a little weak, well, you have to get with it harder. But when I race someone, I go all out all the time, I must say.
Do you ever worry about letting up with say one of the lesser-known drivers?
No, actually, I try and go a little harder with those because they're out to beat you. when I race Garlits or McEwen or one of the named cars, it's usually a very fair race. When you race a guy that's running a little bit slower, less of a name, you find him out ahead of you sometimes.
Garlits and Prudhomme are members of an elite troupe of professional drag racers whose rivalry is as intense as any on earth. And try as they might, the record time at Indy of 6.67 seconds at 231 miles an hour goes to arch competitor Tom McEwen. Another touring professional, Bruce Larson, turns in impressive speeds with his fierce new funny car that becomes an immediate favorite with the crowd. But a majority of the Indy field is composed of amateur weekend racers, people who run for fun. Unable to afford AA fuelers or funny cars, they compete in one of the 90 different classes the NHRA has created. They do their own work, some of it none too glamorous, in order to keep their cars in competition. The machines are temperamental beasts, and in order to keep them running properly, sometimes a bit of moral support is necessary, or even a quick nap. But nobody comes to Indy to rest, and time is running out for the hundreds of cars and drivers who are searching for that extra half second to make the field of 32 finalists in the 7 eliminator categories. The superstock staging lanes begin to look like a Times Square traffic jam as everyone, including Grumpy, lines up for one more crack at the clocks. In a moment, the championship eliminations at Indy. Race day at the Nationals.
On the spectator side is Bill Grumpy Jenkins with a Superstock C Camaro.
When he isn't racing, Bill Grumpy Jenkins is back home in Berwyn, Pennsylvania. As he prepares for the next race, his mind is on those few seconds of victory or defeat, and his hands are on a very expensive automobile. More than a champion driver, he is one of the nation's top automotive engineers. To a man of his reputation, every mechanical detail must be best to work best. He places high priority on clean engine oil for clean engine performance. To answer his own rigid demands, he uses Fram oil filters. He uses Fram because
They work on the strip, and they work on the street.
they work on the strip, they work on the street. Fram oil filters.
Race day, and while others drive, Jenkins pushes his car to the line, cannily saving wear and tear on his engine. He's made the final eliminations by winning a preliminary runoff the day earlier, and now he's ready to defend his title. He has this to say about driving tactics.
The most important skill that you really probably have to put into play is your control over your reactions as far as the starting procedure is concerned, because most of the races between two cars which are equally competitive are won or lost right on the line.
Grumpy Jenkins.
The rest of your action as far as the operation of the car down the track is concerned are pretty much conditioned reflexes. I run every race just the same, just as tight. It's pretty difficult to get your timing straightened out to run just as tight as you can, and if you tried to vary it, I think that you'd be in more trouble. You can maybe have two different approaches to a given situation, one where you know you're going to win, or you know that you're not going to have any trouble, at least predictable trouble, and you may back off completely and wait for the green light, or the other approach is the completely uptight approach, and you just do that every time, just as a matter of staying in practice.
Jenkins wins his first round, but teammate Hedrick and Dick Landy are upset victims. However, the best known of the women drag racers, Shirley Shahan, wins easily and appears to be perfectly comfortable facing the toughest men in the business.
I don't really pay any attention to the competition. I just watch the light. I try to let nothing distract me from what's going on at the line, and that way I'm ready.
Is it hard to, how many races a year do you run?
Well, it's hard to say. We have been on tour since May, and we usually make about 2 meets a week. Over 100 races, I'd say, easy.
Shirley drives well, but is eliminated in a close third-round contest. While Shirley races, other pretty girls just watch, paying particular attention to a special Nationals guest as he tries his hand at super stock racing. TV star Dick Smothers, a fine racing driver in his own right, makes an exhibition run and rolls through the quarter mile like a veteran. Skillful driving is only a part of drag racing. It is a game of horsepower, and the driver who has the most is generally a winner. Bill Jenkins had this to say about his power plant.
Its advertised original horsepower rating was about 375, and in its present state of tune, it's about 540.
What sort of modifications are you permitted to make on the engine in super stock?
In super stock category, NHRA, you're allowed to change your intake manifold as long as it resembles the manifold which originally came on the engine, and you can run any kind of camshaft. You're also allowed to completely go through the engine and build it to certain specifications, which may be somewhat more desirable in assembly line specifications.
While Jenkins' car is readied for its next run, top fuel antagonists Benny Osborne and Don Garlits chat before their upcoming duel. Big Daddy has already disposed of Tom McEwen, and with Don Prudhomme a surprise loser, his chances look better by the minute. Steve Carbone is knocking down his opponents like 10 pins. Now he moves into the staging lights for a round against Leroy Goldstein, a promising newcomer from California.
Two more AA fuelers. Kreitz, Greer, and Donovan. Steve Carbone driving. Leroy Goldstein.
Carbone wins easily when Goldstein tromps too hard on the throttle, breaks traction, and falls far behind. It's Garlits facing reigning world champion Benny Osborne, a man known as the Wizard among the racing fraternity.
And here he comes, ladies and gentlemen. Big Daddy Don Garlits. Don Garlits will come to the line on the tower side. His opponent here. The Wizard of Oz.
Osborne tries hard to get a jump on Garlits, leaves too early, and is disqualified. Big Daddy takes an easy win. The Super Eliminator Championship race features a pair of the wildest cars in the park. Paul Stage in his AA competition rail faces Dino Don Nicholson in his Cougar funny car. Both machines are mad, far-out creations that run the quarter mile nearly as quickly as the fuel dragsters. Stage leaps to an early lead, and try as he might, Nicholson can't catch him. He pops the chute and jounces to a stop, through for the day. It's Grumpy's turn again. He's reached the Super Stock semifinal round, and his competition is Arlen Vanke's Barracuda.
Bill Jenkins, defending national champion, the Super Stock C machine from Berwyn, Pennsylvania. Old Grumpy himself in the spectator lane. And the title lane of former Springnationals champion Arlen Vanke out of Akron, Ohio.
Grumpy sees the green light, pops the clutch, and roars off. But suddenly he loses traction, and chances for the championship disappear beneath his spinning wheels.
I stuck it up on a pretty good number on the tack, on the static RPM, and popped the clutch, and bite was gone for some reason or other. It just sat there, and that was it. You can sit there in the line and say there's no tomorrow, but there's always another one someday, and whether it's next week or next year. And I've been in it now for long enough that you can take losses with the wins and not get so emotionally upset about it.
Vanke barely has time to savor his win over Jenkins before he goes to the line for the championship. Facing him is Camaro driver Wally Booth. NHRA rules give the smaller engine Camaro a slight advantage, and Booth is permitted to leave a second early. Vanke plays catch-up, barely overhauling Booth at the finish line to win the Super Stock Championship. The Top Gas Eliminations, with Walt Rhodes and the Gas House Gang squaring off against Jack Jones. Jones comes to the line as an incredible underdog, having experienced a rash of blown engines and a serious highway crash during practice. The engine in his car is composed of pickup bits and pieces and theoretically belongs in a junkyard, not a championship dragster. Jones moves out fast, then Rhodes loses traction, and Dark Horse Jones gives a wave of victory at 197 miles an hour.
Power side, 7.64 is the winning number. A losing 781.
It's showdown time. The race for Top Fuel Eliminator, the biggest prize in drag racing. Big Daddy Don Garlits gets set to face Steve Carbone, whose times in the opening 4 rounds have been quicker than Garlits. But past records are meaningless against the poise and judgment of the old master, and the pressure on the challenger is nearly overwhelming. And to make matters even more difficult for Carbone, Garlits means business.
Each race seems to be harder than the last one. First I came in, I thought, well, I've won it a couple of times now. It doesn't really make that much difference. But by the time I got it off the trailer, the same old desire was right there. And, I want to win it just as bad as though I had never won the race before.
Big Daddy times the light perfectly and leaves ahead of Carbone. Seeing Garlits breaking into the lead, Carbone feeds his supercharged engine too much fuel, and his hopes for victory go up in smoke. Garlits wins his 2nd consecutive Nationals title and the 3rd of his long career, something akin to climbing Mount Everest and winning the United States Open in a single afternoon. His legions of fans shout and wave their appreciation. Big Daddy's winning elapsed time is a blistering 6.87 seconds with a speed of 226 miles an hour. While Garlits is being mobbed by the crowds, Bill Jenkins, as a deposed champion, loads his cars in privacy. Such is the solitude of a loser. But Grumpy is a professional, and he understands defeat as well as victory. He has lost before and will doubtlessly lose again. But as one of the sharpest competitors in the business, the balance of his races will end in victory. And as for the Nationals, Well, as every racer knows, there'll always be another Indy.
The NHRA National Drags were brought to you by Fram Corporation, maker of the finest in oil, air, and fuel filters.